My parents got divorced when I was 5, and I'm an only child, so I grew up in a house that was very separate, and I spent a lot of time alone. And my grandmother raised me, and she was an amazing woman. She's Mexican, she's my Mexican side, so she really connected me with food and being a strong woman, but being also a woman. And being with her was amazing, with the exception of my grandfather, who was an alcoholic. And nobody ever talked about the alcoholism because it was like normal. So one night he would be raging, and then the next morning everything would be normal, and she'd be cooking breakfast. And so I think, somewhere in my head, that really taught me that even though I knew intuitively that something was off, that everyone else is pretending like nothing's wrong, and so I must be the one that's misreading things. And I think that really laid the foundation for other things to happen to me in my life, to not trust my instinct, to not trust my gut, and to really go with the external rather than the internal. And so, cut to my life going forward, I was a very rebellious teenager. I think that I was rebelling against what happened to me, and nobody ever really acknowledging that or protecting me. But also no one really paying attention to me. I really wanted my parents to get in there and, be around, and they really weren't. And so when I was 16, I connected with a guy that I was really sure of myself in a false way. I was really, again, with the external, like really trying to put on that I was tough and I was like cool and I got this and I don't need anybody. And I met this guy, and I was so naive. I wasn't a virgin, but I was so naive that I thought this 23-year-old guy was going to be my boyfriend. And long story short, it was a situation of date rape. And again, similarly to me growing up, I really felt like, it really took me a long time to acknowledge that that happened to me, because I thought it was my fault again. I thought that I was the one that met him, that talked to him, that invited him over. And so again, that underlying trust, that underlying gut feeling that something's wrong, maybe I shouldn't be in this situation, I just pushed that to the side. And then, those situations really shaped me going forward, where I really just did not like myself. Inside, because when you're not staying true to who you are, even if you don't know what that is, you have this sense of like disconnect. And I just felt like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't, I was damaged. And it was also very intense because he also gave me some STDs. So I was left with this reminder of how I'm not good enough. And then I was a dancer. I was a performer since I was 5. I danced, and that whole world goes along with not being good enough, not having the ideal body type, not having the most technique, and I just fell into a situation where I was working in a show, and basically they told me I wasn't good enough. I was too heavy, and I needed to lose weight, and I literally just didn't eat. And I think that idea of punishing myself was part of that dynamic. It's like, we're talking about pleasure or accepting what's good. I didn't even know what was good. I didn't even know. I just thought I deserve this. Bad relationships. I dated alcoholics. I really continued that cycle of abuse, but also self-abuse. So now, it took me a long time in terms of my body. I'm not in the world anymore of acting and dancing, and not because of that specifically, but I really try to put myself into situations where I'm allowed to be myself. I'm a lot different in my body, not just my feeling for myself, but in my physical body. When I stopped dancing, I normalized. And it was really nice to come to a point where I was like, I'm gonna eat whatever I want, and I'm not gonna care about what I look like. And that doesn't mean that I don't think about that, or I don't hum and haw if I have, like, I love burritos and tacos. I'm Mexican, so, you know, if I have like a giant burrito, I'm not like, great, that was great, you know. But I think for me, what I got down to is like, guess what? I get to make the choice. And guess what? Nobody's gonna dictate how good I am or how bad I am. That I actually get to make the choice, and therein lies the power. And that's what I didn't have growing up. I didn't have the power living in an alcoholic home. I didn't have the power in that situation. And so taking the power back for myself comes in the form of making choices that are right for me and listening to myself. And let me tell you, like, this is not just something that I like rolled over. One morning I was like, yes, I feel great about myself. Lots of therapy. I mean, especially with the sexual abuse. I was in therapy for a very long time. And I actually had a boyfriend who kind of helped me uncover it. But I think the biggest thing is that talking. Is the communication, is the sharing of your story, whether it's one-on-one with a therapist, you know, a qualified health practitioner, whether it's writing, whether it's performing, you know, whatever it is that you can share, your story really heals that, because it takes your power back. Because the silence and the covering up, the shame, you know, oh, I ate that, I shouldn't have eaten that, or I'm gonna punish myself and not eat all day, and now I've eaten this thing and, you know, I'm a horrible person, or, oh, I made a mistake and, you know, got myself into a situation I shouldn't have, as in, like, you know, in a sexual way. It's not gonna go away altogether. But if you can find situations where you feel empowered and you start to empower yourself and your own healing, that's really where the change occurs. So it is an ongoing, and I don't even want to say struggle, because really it's not about struggling now, it's about awareness. But there are always these little like bubbles, I call them, you know, that float to the surface, and a reminder of the pattern that you used to have. There's several things like I encounter. I think the two biggest areas, obviously, you know, dealing with substance abuse, not personally, but dealing with others that have substance abuse, and the shame of that. You know, I didn't tell this in my earlier story, but essentially my ex that I lived with for a long time that was an alcoholic passed away. And nobody wanted to acknowledge that he was an alcoholic. His family told everybody that he had a heart problem. And so somebody might say to me, oh, I heard about, you know, so-and-so, and it's so sad that he had a heart problem. And it's like, no, he didn't. So, you know, telling the truth again, not covering it up, so not allowing your voice to be dampened. And then in terms of like food and sexuality, with food, I think it's less with food for me and more with, because I spent so much time as a dancer looking at myself in the mirror and comparing myself. And it's funny because at home I don't have a lot of mirrors, but at work I own a Pilates studio, so I do see myself in the mirror, and I work with women in their bodies that I don't allow anybody to use the word fat. I call that the F word because it really is like, it's just about, it brings up stuff for me. I mean, I know it's about me and more so than about them. But I'll look at myself sometimes and I'll think like, oh, you know, I don't really like the way I look right now, or I don't really like as much weight I've gained, and I can go down the road, and I envision it like two paths. It's like I can go down that road and I can be negative and I can be self-deprecating and I can go on and on about that, or I can make a choice. So what would the choice be and how would I rather be? Right? So for instance, do I want to just maybe go to another yoga class this week? Or I love to spin, like go to another spin class so that I can do something that's healthy for me that might fulfill myself, because it's honestly, for me now, it's not about a size, it's about how I feel. And I think that's the other thing too, is like not just looking at what you look like and looking at the external, but how do I feel inside, and taking that path. And so doing things that are healthy for me, going to yoga, meditating, moving. Exercise is really what healed me, I think, in terms of my body, because I went from a really negative connotation with movement and my body. And so now I really do things I only do things that make me feel good about my body. And that's why I love SoulCycle, because like, especially my teachers I go to, it's all about positivity. It's in a dark room. It's not about wearing a little half top with flat abs. And for me to get to a point where I could wear a half top in that class was a big deal, and it makes me feel good about myself. So I take the choice. I make a choice that I'm going to do something positive and proactive rather than sit in the negative. And then in terms of sexuality, I mean, that's an ongoing struggle for me. I'll be honest. Because of the STDs, I still have complications, reminders of what happened to me. It's not easy, and I'm single. So that's a difficult thing when you run up against somebody you like and you have to have a conversation with them about this, and they judge you, or whatever that's coming from them comes out to you. I think the reminder I have to say to myself, I mean, I literally do this. I literally do stuff that makes me feel loved and comforted. So if that's taking a blanket and wrapping it around me, if that's watching I really, really love Grey's Anatomy. I've watched like 10, and it's like a comforting show, whatever it is that's healthy, not destructive, right? Like I could easily go to alcohol and drugs. And I'm not saying that I've never done that, or that it's never a temptation to just block it out. But I really try to stay present. And there's like a little light at the end of the tunnel. When you go through that and you don't engage in the negative behavior, it literally is like, it's like Superwoman. You just kind of get like this like inner strength. And the more you do that, it's like exercising, right? It's like you do an exercise, it's really hard, you keep coming back, you do it more, it's easier and easier, and it feels better. And so for me, when I'm in that situation where I get negativity, I remind myself, A, they're coming from their issues, that it's not all about me, and that B, I'm okay, that I'm gonna be okay no matter what. And if all of those things fail, I think I get down and get grateful. I really try to focus on stuff that I am happy for and grateful for in my life, because that just changes your perspective immediately. It's like if you start, you just, again, that road, it's like picking that road. It's a decision. But at the same time, I didn't ever do anything alone, right? I have a great support system. My family is very supportive. My friends are very supportive. I have a great therapist. I used to go to Al-Anon meetings. You can't do it alone, because that's when you're gonna go down that negative road. So 3 things that I would advise a woman to do when they're struggling with these kind of situations. First thing is definitely don't isolate. I think as women, we are so ingrained. It's so ingrained in us that we're like the strong one, that we have to be strong. Because we get admonished for our emotions, right? Oh, you're too emotional, or you're too sensitive. And so I think, especially for me, I was an only child. I don't have a partner. I can go into my apartment and just isolate. And that really is where things start to spiral down. So even if that's just getting out of my house and taking a walk through my neighborhood, where I'm not alone, I'm seeing other people, I'm maybe interacting with pets or whatever it is, do not isolate, because that is really the worst thing you can do. So if you are struggling with eating disorders, substance disorders, that's why going to those meetings like Al-Anon, Overeaters Anonymous, Codependents Anonymous, that's why it really helps, because you hear other people's stories and you create connections. So definitely don't isolate. Get help. Let's see, the second thing that I want to say, in terms of food and exercise, find things that are good for you that you really love. like forcing yourself to do exercise or eating like, I don't know, I love Brussels sprouts, but maybe somebody doesn't like Brussels sprouts. Forcing yourself, it just enforces that negative self-loathing behavior. So for me, I love to spin. I love to do yoga. I love to do Pilates. I don't go to dance class anymore because it's very hard in New York City for me to find a class where I feel good, where I don't feel like I'm comparing myself to. So I stick with the things that feel really good, and I also really try to dress nicely. Like, I know that sounds weird, but I wear exercise clothes that make me feel good. I wear like stuff that fits me right, that feels good, that I feel confident in, and I go that route. In terms of food, things that nourish me, you know, I mean, I love cheese, so I'm never not going to eat cheese. It's just not going to happen. I also really love beer, craft beer, but I balance that, right? So maybe I'll have a salad while I'm having a beer, or I'll have, you know, cheese and crackers, and then I'll have, you know, something lighter for dinner. But I don't deny myself the pleasure. I definitely don't associate foods being good or bad. I just try to find the ones that I really love and cherish them. So I'm eating things slowly. I'm in the moment with the pleasure of the beer, of the cheese, you know, and so that I'm not denying that. So finding things that you really love and cherishing them. And then the third thing, I think, you know, my biggest thing is just tell your truth. It's hard for women because we're caretakers and we worry about everyone else other than ourselves, and whatever that form that takes for you. I think the biggest victories and strength I've gained in my life has been from telling my truth. So whether it's about stories that I've been through, whether it's about something I'm going through that day, like when even something as simple as someone says, "How are you today?" And we say, "Oh, fine." You know, and it's not like you have to go into this whole, like, you know, sob story, but you know what, I'm not great today. Because I guarantee that other person is gonna say, really, what's going on? Let's talk, let's go have a cup of coffee. And suddenly your day shifts. So, you know, it goes along with the isolation, but really telling your truth and sharing your story. If you've had trauma, if you are going through addiction, share your story because it really does heal. And inevitably, sharing your story with others will inspire change in them. And let me tell you, that is the road to healing. Because when you see someone else be affected by the pain that you've gone through in your life, and maybe you've saved someone just a little bit of pain or loneliness, it really, really, it just feeds your soul.